Hi, this is Tony Ruggiero. Thanks for listening to The Tour Coach. These are the players, coaches, experts, stories, and insights from my work on the PGA Tour at my retreats or my downtown teaching center in Mobile, Alabama. My goal is to shed light and share insights from the people who I've gotten to know and meet working on the PGA Tour and teach it through my career. And I hope this helps all of us play, coach, and teach better golf. If you like what you hear, please give us a good review and take a look at our new Dew Sweepers YouTube channel or the Dew Sweeper on Instagram, where I've taken some time to share videos of help from my teachings, travels, and journeys. So sitting in with me here on the Tour Coach, one of the great teachers out there, you see him all over. His list of students is, he's got a stable of students from Kisner to Fowler, Sepp Straka, great young player, such a good dude too. List goes on and on. My good friend John Tillery. Tillery, what's up, JT?
Hey, Tony, how you doing?
Doing good, man. I've been wanting to have you on this, and like I said before, we hoping to do this over a few beers, but this will have to do because our schedules are tough to coordinate. But I talk with you a little bit about coaching out there on tour, and a little bit your philosophy about how you develop players and the things you look for in taking a young player and making them better. Where do you start? I always find it interesting. One of the questions I get a lot about this podcast is like, where do you start when a player comes to you?
Obviously at the tour player level, we have a lot of access to stats and all these kind of things, right? So it's pretty easy to sort of track down where a guy's kind of hurting or losing shots or what their trends or patterns have kind of been. And I probably, before I say much to anybody, I'll kind of get a snapshot of that in my mind and then kind of back my way into from there back down to kind of into their motion. And then, a lot of it, as you know, right, these guys are all wired a little different. So you got to be a little bit of a chameleon if you're going to help more than one of them. And you try to just kind of see their patterns and kind of see how they're wired, see where they're at and what they know or what they think or their beliefs in the golf swing or whatever it may be. So there's a pretty decent, got to be a little bit of a data gathering sort of period there, right, to kind of know who's in front of you and what their goals are. I've always found it, I won't say easy, it's hard work, right, but I've always felt like there's, if somebody has some open gaps or some things that you can jump right on and help them, I feel like to get some of the guys from kind of the bottom end, if you want to call it that, like say on tour, to start gaining and running up the list a little bit is fairly doable, if you have all the pieces in place. It obviously gets trickier as the guys get better and better. And I think it gets trickier as you run into guys that have had more and more success, right? When you kind of get a blank slate, somebody that's sort of an open book and all in, I feel like that's a pretty good foot to get off of and get going on. And it gets a little trickier when you've got a guy that's kind of, trying to get back to somewhere they may have been before, for example.
Agree. And because I think some of the, to me, some of the most fun are the young guys that maybe aren't on tour, but, have tons of talent. And maybe they've had some instruction, but they haven't really been part of a whole thing. And they just totally buy in,
Mm-hmm. It's the
and
best,
they like,
sure.
Like where they'll go to the, where they'll work with the people that you trust and have around you, and they buy all in. And then I think the ones that are more challenging are, like you said, the ones that been out there longer and they've had a bunch of, they've gotten a lot of information and they got a lot of opinions and stuff. Like, to me, that's where it's a little more challenging because you kind of sometimes you got to dance around some of those things a little bit.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely tricky. I mean, I think, to some extent that works its way all the way down to even say like to the club golfer, it's like how many lessons have you given where you're just halfway through it and you're like, man, are you going to talk away the last 30 minutes here, or like, why don't you give me a try here? It gets hard. It's like it's a two-way street, right? For guys to get better, you need to have a good coach and you have somebody that knows your stuff in front of you. But then you got to be a good learner too.
Right.
And when you find the right kind of combo right there, it's like you said, it's a lot of fun.
Don't you think too? Like I think that. I mean, I always say, like, I think most of the guys doing what you do, I think we're all pretty good teachers. I don't think there's anybody, but like, I think a lot of the success is finding the right match, like the person that you click with, that communicates with you, right? And also is good at,
figuring all that out because, like, I mean, there's guys out there that would be horrible matches for me, but would be great with somebody else or whatever. Like I think I think that can be equally as important in some ways.
Yeah, I agree. When you get people who are kind of sort of wired the same or sort of speak the same language, or a lot of times you just have if your goals are kind of aligned, right? If you want to spend a ton of time with somebody and go try to conquer the world, and then, somebody needs to kind of be wired that way a little bit also. And there's no doubt, you get a lot of, it's one thing, people look at whoever it is that somebody's working with. And like you said, you're going to run into a lot of similar kind of X's and O's. And then, but there's a lot more to it, right? Of if somebody's, you're working with somebody and they're hitting some certain shot and it's blatantly, obviously because of this or that, it's like, well, that's just the starting point, right? It's like a lot of people know that, but it's like, now how are you going to go about getting it done or convincing them to get it done? And sometimes they speak a whole different language than you do. You almost have to, you got options, either brainwash them into your style, or you got to learn to speak, a different language, the one that they do,
Yeah.
These guys are definitely all wired a lot different. And it's half the art is trying to figure out how to get done what you want to get done and without it having to be your way or having to be your idea.
Yeah, one of my favorites is like you see a player and it's like obvious, like you said, what they're doing. And then you start for 2 minutes into what you think and they go, oh, I've already tried that, doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, now what we got? You could have helped me and told me that before we started.
Yeah.
But
I think the whole thing just like learning or changing. Changing is just so hard in general, right? To me, the only way that ever worked is you have to have an environment to where they're able to lay down reps a lot of times away from a golf ball, right? Where you take away the kind of fight or flight, kind of what they're going to do, and you start training those patterns, moving it into a way that you want it. And I mean, that's half the battle, right? Is because half the thing that makes these guys good is hitting good shots. Well, range ball matters to them. So it's like you said, when I've tried that, or that doesn't feel right, or whatever it may be,
How do you deal with like the schedule now? Say you pick up a guy, I've had this recently, you start helping a guy, you get asked to help, and you're in the middle of the season,
right?
And it's hard. I think that's the most challenging. They don't have a lot of time off, so then you help them for a few hours or whatever. But and it's hard to get stuff, to get a lot of change done. Then when they're gonna in 2 days they're gonna go tee it up and it counts.
Oh, 100%, right? I mean, to me that's the biggest challenge. And ever since the fall finish started counting towards next year, that kind of flipped a lot of our worlds. It did mine. I know flipped my world kind of upside down on how I would like for things to go, because used to, if you had a guy had a pretty solid year, they'd hardly play any of that fall finish. And so I mean, you go from September or October, and I'd go to them. They'd come to Tuscaloosa. We'd work here. What felt like almost every week for 3 or 4 months, and then 3 months maybe, and then send them to the West Coast, and then I'd see them at Honda, right? And now it's like you have a couple of weeks off, and like you said, every time you walk up there to help somebody, they're 36 or 48 hours from teeing off the first hole in a tournament, so they don't want to get far away from comfortable. So when you really have somebody that you really do need to kind of fundamentally change a little something, it gets really difficult. The rest of the time, once Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday mornings hit, you're doing your best to kind of have them sort of calibrated up and dialed in best you can for that week, and maybe what that course is, or kind of what they've been struggling with, those kind of things. But yeah, it's definitely difficult to get them away from. I always joke that you travel and you go, and we go to all these 25 events a year or whatever about that I go to, and you have to, right, because just the way the schedule is, and guys are everywhere, and seeing them in a circus is better than not seeing them at all. And
right.
But there's no doubt, I always joke about that. Me with one of my guys here, just us, like a full day here is about the equivalent of 4 or 5 tournaments.
100%, don't you think?
Yeah, I do, for sure. I mean, it gets really hard if in my opinion, you have to kind of have a plan laid out that you put together at home. Everybody's bought in, everybody's on the same page, and then everybody do their best on the road to kind of run that plan, So yeah, obviously if you if you get the training, you get the drills and stuff laid out that you want them to do, and everybody kind of accountable and on the same page with that, that helps. Obviously, having the trainers on board with it, to me, is critical. It's just, otherwise, like you said, they're coming from one week to the next, and, they start kind of running towards their tendencies or running away. And then if you get playing bad, then they're wanting to get more and more, stay closer and closer to the chest, so it gets tricky.
Let me ask you this question, and I know this isn't realistic because the tour isn't going to listen to anything we said or whatever, or a player, like, what would be what do you think really would be the best way for a competitive player to work? Like, I don't think it's to have us out there 20-something weeks a year, right? Like, I think, right. To me, sometimes I wonder if I know we have to go out there, it's just part of it's evolved to what the business side of it is, right?
Right.
But to me, for a player, I don't know that, for them actually acquiring it, taking it to the golf course, kind of being out there every week or 2 weeks is the best.
Yeah, like you said, it's kind of a necessary evil. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd have an environment where they kind of had to own it a little more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, I mean, it's tough having to travel a bunch just to get the time with the guys. I personally think that if, you could go to probably half as many as you go and spend twice as many days with them at home as the average kind of relationship sort of looks like, would be way more productive.
If you figure out a way to get that done, would you let me know?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I know, if it were me, I would spend full days I'd try my best to spend a day or two in my off weeks. I know it's hard when you're not home that much, and then also, even the weeks that I was going, I think I'd be better off with a lot of my guys sometimes if we wouldn't spend a full Monday at home, before they left.
Mm-hmm. Right.
A lot of times, it's an event they've played for the 8th or 9th year in a row, whatever it may be, and they're out there on a Monday afternoon, or play all 18 on Monday and then 9, and they have pro-am. It's kind of like, man, we'd gotten so much more done if just me and you had hung out all day at my place all day Monday, and then you go up there and play 9-9 and crack it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that some of the best success I've had with players has been with a couple times going down before Honda the Sunday before and doing a bunch of work at a home course. It's not out at the golf course.
Yeah, because it's a circus, right? I mean, it's the only professional sport in the world where there's that many people have access to your office, so to speak. So players are talking to players, caddies, media. You got the press, got the reps, got you name it, right? And the driving range out there is it's a fine place to kind of have your baselines kind of laid down, keep reiterating sort of what it is you're working on. Whether it's using TrackMan, these kind of things to sort of tighten them up and do wedge combines, all that kind of stuff. But as far as getting them to kind of push the limits to kind of really working them, it's a tricky place to try to work.
It's tough. It's tough. Ask you this question, because I think I've crossed the line a couple times. But do you have a limit of how many guys you can work with, or you think, or what's the right amount? I think sometimes and I know getting a bunch of them is good, and it's good for business and it's good. But I've had times where I think I had too many for my styles to to spend a bunch of time with them and all that, where you feel like you're then you feel like at the end you feel like I hadn't really done anything, or this guy kind of got left out for 2 weeks.
Right.
How do you manage that? Because I think that's pretty challenging.
No, it is. It definitely is. I have 5 guys, and I can't imagine adding another one.
Right.
And I don't, and I won't, as things are right now. I love the squad that I got, and luckily all my guys get along, so they play a ton of practice rounds and stuff together, which makes it easy until they get done, right? And then they all go hit at the same time. But it's easier. But it's easier, that everybody, and I got a bunch of good guys too, so everybody kind of gets to this.
Yeah.
Somebody's maybe struggling or wants more time with me. Everybody else kind of understands, and I think that's why you end up having to go to a lot, right? Because the time when you really, like you said, when you really look back at it, it's like the 2 or 3 days of travel, and then you put it into, it was 9 holes with this guy in an hour session, right? Mm-hmm. It just took 2 or 3 days to do it. I mean, that's the hard math problem on it.
Right.
And probably why we have to be on the road as much as you are, because it's, like I said, it's better than not seeing them, So a lot of it for me is at least when I'm there and I can take videos and stuff and talk to them. And then when I get home, I can send them stuff, and I can send them stuff to watch for. Same thing with the caddy. I can send them, talk to their trainers. I can send videos. Hey, I need to do this make sure when you're doing this that blah, 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 those kind of things. And so at least when you're out there, you can get video from the course and stuff and kind of keep them between the lines and keep sort of laying the plan down. But yeah, the 5 I got, plus the 2 boys I got at home, and trying to teach a decent bit when I'm at home. It's a sleep when you're dead kind of situation already. So I couldn't imagine having more.
I understand that. Let's talk about how did you get your start teaching? Take me back to the beginning. I know everybody knows about you from, your tour stuff and all the great players you have and all the success you've had. And, and you're a humble guy. Like, you don't go out there talking about, you don't post something every day telling everybody how great you are. So where did you get your start teaching? Like, what got you into teaching? And take me along that path a little bit.
Yeah, so I was always, I never set out to teach. I mean, I wanted to play. I wanted to be a good player, but I was always kind of looking back on it, I was always kind of a junkie for it. I was the guy at high school and on the college team that everybody made fun of for standing out there videoing my swing every day instead of going and playing. And I worked with, I remember having the old Channel 2. I remember my mom in the front yard videoing me with a big Channel 2 news camera thing and take the VHS upstairs when I'm in the 7th grade or whatever and put it in there and draw lines on the dry erase on the big old tube TVs, so I didn't know it at the time, but my destiny was probably set. It just wasn't what I had in mind at the time, but I was always into it. And I just worked with it. I just worked with everybody in the world, and then, that I could get in front of trying to get better. And obviously I hear a lot of different stuff, right? And I kind of just got in the weeds in it, and before long I was kind of almost probably got more obsessed with that than even playing. And so I ran around and missed every cut there was on mini tours for 2 years by about a shot, and I could shoot one worse than the cut, whether it was 4 over or 5 under, I could do it. And and then ended up taking a little job at a little good old boy country club down the road here, and was there for 3 or 4 years and got to teaching a good bit there. And then I guess 100 years ago, it feels like now, Blake Adams was one of the first guys that ever kind of took me on the road with him. Right. Went to a handful of tournaments with him. And then Brownie, actually Scott Brown, I played against him in college, started working with him. And then a few months later, I guess he didn't have any status. He got into Puerto Rico a few months later, and he won there and then got his card. And then just kind of snowballed right from there. Kiz was obviously lives in Aiken. So I'm down there working with Brownie a lot, and Kiz was struggling, and started working with him. And then that was probably kind of where it really took off. Like a year or so later, Kiz had that 2015, kind of had that huge year. What seemingly to everybody else in the world is kind of out of nowhere, right?
That's good, though.
Yeah. And then, and then just kind of went from there. It's a small world out there, right? So
yeah,
it's one of those fool me once kind of things is one thing, but I think once people see a couple guys start beating on them that hadn't beat on them before, they kind of want to figure out what's going on,
I think I think a lot of guys, mine was kind of the same. I taught Bobby Wyatt coming up, and Bobby Shelton, and then Smiley Kaufman had that, I taught him into college, and I know you've spent some time with Smiley, but all of a sudden he goes out there and wins, and then everybody, it just seems like that's kind of the way it happens, Yeah. And I don't see many guys just walking up and down the tee at a tour event with a bunch of people that didn't have somebody that, that wasn't that good that got really good.
No, there's no doubt. And we get a lot of the praise for when you're playing good, but it's, everybody that's, like this week in Dallas, half the people out there are going to have somebody standing behind them. And almost every one of those people had multiple people that poured into them over the last 20 something years.
Right.
And a lot of times that kind of gets handed off, So yeah, it takes, I always say it's true. It's like it takes a village. And a lot of times people sort of see the finished product a lot. And by the time they get out there, they're obviously pretty weathered and have built at least a pattern and a game and skills necessary to stand on one of those ranges. There's been a lot put into that thing before. A lot of, guys like us, if you want to ever see them, right?
And I think, too, people see, they see you with a bunch of guys playing good or whatever, and they think that you don't have, that they only see the good, right? But man, there's times that everybody plays bad. There's times you get fired that you feel like you did a good job, and it frustrates you and it hurts your feelings, and all because you spend a bunch of time. Like, it's not always like hell. I mean, I've been fired so many times this year. I mean, hell, I'm about in the unemployment line, right? But like everybody, you know what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah,
and the thing I was going to ask you is sometimes like when you go through those stretches, I actually feel like I've gotten better teaching.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Right?
It's weird.
No doubt. It's fun when it goes smooth and easy, but a lot of times the work or the ones that took way longer to get better, the ones that almost didn't even work out, you learn a lot from that of if you had it over.
Right.
This player, say this point in their career with these tendencies and they're wired this way and blah, 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 blah. It's like if you have it over, would you either say, it's not going to work or if you could do it again, what would you have done different? And the next time you have somebody in that same thing, you kind of come in there guns loaded, But yeah, it's not all roses, that's for sure. It's all the work behind the scenes, right? It's like take somebody like Kiz. It's like there was a year and a half of, and we still go back and forth, But I mean, we're like brothers with each other now. But there was lots of hard work and lots of grinding, a lot of cussing and throwing clubs and you name it. And before anybody ever, sees them up there winning a golf tournament. And honestly, like that's the kind of environment you need. It's like I've always felt like, if on my end, it's like Kiz told me in 2013 that if I would give him the right information, he'd be the best student I ever had. And if he didn't get better, he'd fire me. And I was like, well, we're going to be together a long time if that's true, because, I've always felt that it's not me knowing what to do or how to make these guys better. It's just one way or the other, whether it's my fault, their fault, some kind of combo, whatever, can we get it done or not? And I love being held accountable to being able to write the plan and write the training. I feel like if it goes that way, that 10 out of 10 are going to get better. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot harder to get for that to go like you want it to than it sounds on paper.
Right. And I'm a big plan guy, like with players. I think that's like the most important thing is to sit there and lay down big picture, like where you're going and what you both have to do together. I think that's so critical. And I think that's obviously important with tour players, but I think it's really important with like good junior players going to college, mm-hmm. right, where they know where you're going long term and it's not something different every time.
Yeah, no doubt. Especially when you catch them young, right?
Right.
Almost don't quite understand the importance of kind of building a swing that more or less is kind of blueprinted and done by the time before they get hair under their arms that they can kind of have for the rest of their life, and you're obviously going to be kind of tweaking it here and there and always trying to make it more and more efficient. But you see it all the time, right? When there's some kid that's beating on everybody in the local junior stuff, and then, we've just seen it so many times that you're just like, man, I hope that deal holds up for him because I don't like it,
Yeah.
So, a lot of times people hunt success so early in the junior world, and I think those are the two sides that are hard. To me, you take a 10-year-old and him and his parents won't think that every tournament, every weekend's, the end of the world. Well, it gets hard to, you can't get them away from it to see the big picture. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I think, it's easy to run in that even with tour players too, right? It's so competitive and it's hard for those guys because it's an individual game. And, I think it's difficult for them sometimes just to get their hands off the steering wheel. And, they obviously love you and they hired you because they believe in you, but it's hard for them to totally let off the reins and let you kind of drive. And, the more that I feel like the more times that happens is when I feel like guys get better. It gets tough, right?
Oh, it's tough.
It's tough to get them to do it, especially, like I said, especially if they're there a long time. And, I always joke about that there's only so many bottles of water that somebody else can open for you before you get hard to teach.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great analogy, too, because I think they've got to be open, and I think that's a big part. I mean, we have to do our job, but, and I think that's good for, juniors and college players, too. And, you talked about the student that's talked to you for 30 minutes before you even get to do anything, you get this a lot with these parents nowadays with college players. They want to tell you everything the kid needs to do and what they should be doing before you've watched the kid hit the first ball.
Right. Yeah, there's no doubt. I think that's probably changed a lot too with, the availability of good teachers and technology and YouTube and whatever. It's, there's a lot more experts running around these days. And, obviously everybody wants best for their kids, but I think sometimes it's just hard to kind of let go a little bit and just say, hey,
right.
Especially if the dad, hadn't played in tournament golf or whatever. I think, it's so hard to kind of convince them that, hey, I know you care, you love your kid, but like if you can kind of let off the reins here, get them in front of somebody that cares about them and that's a competent coach, and then just hold them accountable to what the coach wants them to do and support them and see what happens.
Right. You got to be accountable. And I think I see it all the time. You have a kid that's a good player, good college player, and, whatever, but you can only take them. A good friend of mine, Colby, too. Yeah, I know you know Colby out there.
Yep.
Like, he works with he comes and does a bunch of my junior stuff. But you can only take a college player to him 10, 12 times, and then he shows up and you can tell he hasn't done any of the stuff to get stronger or better before. It's not my fault if you're not getting better, right? But at a certain point, the player has to be accountable to do it.
There's no doubt. And that's what I was saying. It kind of has to go both ways, right? It's like you need we have to be accountable. If a guy totally buys in and doesn't get better, it's like, well, then he should fire you.
Correct, 100%.
Yeah, but then if, and I'm totally fine with that, I have a hard time, living with the other results, and it may be a control issue of mine, but I don't do good as a consultant.
No, I agree. I understand that. Every time I've tried to be a consultant, I end up either being in control or getting fired. Right? Because it doesn't work. You're you go into I just want to consult, but then you're like, well, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, like you said, the relationship and how people communicate, right? How many great players had one coach for so long, or had, eventually ended up with one coach that they kind of ran the rest of their career out with. Mm-hmm. It makes everybody kind of be in full exposure and vulnerable to talk with each other and not hold anything back. And I'm not saying it has to be mean or unprofessional and disrespectful, but it's, it's hard to get better. These guys are really good, and then change is tough. So everything's got to be on the table. It's got to be, you have to do it exactly like this or it's not going to work. And then I need to know everything you think about it as we go. And,
right.
When you have that relationship where, each side cares about the other and they're all on the same page, and, player it and trying to, worrying about hurting his coach's feelings, and coach it and trying to not get fired, it works a lot better that way.
Yeah. You can't, I guess one of the things I've learned is you can't operate being afraid to get fired.
No. It's the fastest way too, right?
Right. Yeah. But, and then the other thing, just to kind of wrap it up, like you were talking about too, you talked about players that have, where they've had long-term success staying, either finishing a career or staying with the, one coach the whole career. I think one of the biggest things with all the information out there is that everybody feels like, they can bounce, they bounce around and get tons of ideas, and, because there's so much info out there, but they don't buy in and commit to somebody wholeheartedly. And you just don't see that many real success stories nowadays. To me, I'm sure there's somebody I'm forgetting, and somebody will bust my ass for it, but you don't see that many people that where they just keep bouncing to 5 or 6 people in 2 years, and then all of a sudden they're top players in the world. It just doesn't happen like that.
No, I think it's just so hard, Greg, because it's honestly, even if it's repetition and ownership, right? So it's really and truly, even if somebody was say that somebody was, hearing something from their coach that maybe I almost didn't agree with, or would have said it a different way. The reality of it is, if they buy into it and the plan never changes, they get better and better and better at it. So the one that's impossible to lay down is the plan that's always changing, and I think that's what makes getting better so difficult, is it's hard to do the same right things every single day and not be narrow focused enough to think that a bad week, 2 weeks in a row, means that the stuff's wrong, or that a good week means that I don't have to keep doing it.
Right. No, that's beautiful. That's awesome. JT, this was awesome stuff. I know you're crazy busy, especially when you're home getting ready to head to Dallas, but I appreciate you taking the time, and you've always been great to me. I've shared some videos with you before. I think that's another thing people don't understand is good coaches share videos with other people. They ask for help. It doesn't mean you think you know everything all by yourself. People are shocked when I tell them that people do that stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot smaller world out there than people know, right?
We're all just trying to not get fired, and do okay.
You got to be a certain kind of crazy to do what we do. So there's not a ton of them that do it for long. So yeah, it's a small world, and you don't have there's not a lot of rivals and that kind of thing going on, right? It's a good sport. It's a good space to be in. A lot of good folks out there, and it's a tighter unit than probably the average fan knows.
Yeah, because I think everybody genuinely is happy for the other guys that have been out there for a while, because I think everybody knows how. I don't think people realize how, you can have stretches where it's pretty bad, right? And you feel like you suck. And, you know what I'm saying? And people don't realize that, shoot, like when Seth won with you, the first person I thought of to text was you, right? People don't realize all the stuff that goes into it. So you know how hard it is when somebody wins and has success. Yeah,
it's hard. And, and you're always happy for whoever it was, right? If you spend any time with them, and, you ultimately want them to play well. And and it's there's not much better than when it goes well, but it takes a lot of time, sweat, and some sleepless nights a little bit to get the job done sometimes. But I think eventually, do what I do, it's just you get to where you just don't know any different, right? You just kind of on autopilot every day. You jump up and try to figure out how to make your guys and your kids get better, and go pay your dues and go home and hope you did good and pray for everybody and go to bed and get up and do it again.
Yep, that's it. That sounds like our next couple months, doesn't it?
Yep.
Hey, I appreciate you sitting in. I look forward to you. I'm sure I'll see you on the range out there in Dallas. But anyways, appreciate you sitting in and appreciate all your help over the years and being such a good dude and good friend. And I'll look forward to catching up soon.
Sounds good, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Tour Coach. I want to take a minute and thank Cordy Walker and Golf Science Lab, as well as my sponsors Srixon, Buick, Bushnell, and Vineyard Vines for helping make all of this possible and helping me share my insights with you. If you like what you've heard, why don't you check out more on the Dew Sweepers channel on YouTube, as well as the Dew Sweeper on Instagram, or go to dewsweepersgolf.com to find out more about my teaching, my travels, and where you can find out more about me.